So, for my first proper video, I feel it's important to start off by saying I do actually like D&D 5e. Overall, I think it's a very strong system, but it does have some glaring weaknesses. And whilst we're not going to be going over all the strengths and weaknesses of 5e in this video, I might do that later. Today, we're going to be looking at what I believe is one of the most glaring problems with D&D 5e, and that is the death saving throws and the death mechanics in general. And make sure you watch to the end of the video to learn how you can save money on your favourite clickety-clacks. And so, with no further ado, let's get into it. So, for those of you unaware, D&D 5e has a system where when you hit 0 hit points, your character is knocked unconscious. On each of their subsequent turns, they then have to roll a d20, and essentially there's a 50-50 chance on whether they either pass or fail a death saving throw. If they fail 3 death saving throws, their character is dead. If at any point they're healed whilst they are unconscious, in their next turn they can act normal and get back into the fight. Additionally, if you roll a nat 1 on the dice, it's the equivalent of failing 2 death saving throws, and if you roll a nat 20, you naturally get back up yourself on a single hit point. Now, to me, this system has 3 major issues. Number 1, it takes away player agency. Number 2, despite it being life and death situation, there's not really any real consequences. And similarly, it seems to lack any real tension. I think the overall problems with the death saving throw mechanic can probably be best demonstrated by an actual story that happened in my table. The party's rogue gets a bit out of position and goes down. Fortunately, it's their turn next, so they roll a death saving throw and pass it. It then comes along to the paladin's turn. The paladin has a choice. He can either heal his downed ally or attack some monsters and help clear the combat faster. Knowing that his ally has passed the death saving throw and will be safe until their next turn, he decides to take out the immediate threat and realistically wins the combat. Now, I want to stress, I don't think my player did anything wrong in this situation. Using the information to hand, they realistically made the correct choice for that moment and played the best. This was part of the game, and realistically they made the correct choice. The fault isn't with my player, it's with the system as a whole. So, how do we as DMs go about fixing this situation? Personally, I have 3 homebrew rules that I use in all my campaigns that I feel addresses the 3 main issues that I addressed earlier. The first of which I like to refer to as the Boromir rule. Spoilers for Lord of the Rings, I guess? But look, if you've not watched it by this point, that's on you. Boromir gets shot. A few times. The first thing that the Boromir rule does is, instead of the player being knocked unconscious when they hit 0 hit points, they instead enter a wounded state, meaning they're still conscious and can still talk to other players. Additionally, on their turns, they can either roll a death saving throw as they normally would, or they can choose to automatically fail a death saving throw, but they can use an action to make a single attack, cast a cantrip, interact with an object, or to drag themselves half their movement range. And whilst it might be a little bit gamey, a player cannot use this action to heal themselves in any way. For example, they could not go into their bag and pull out a healing item to be able to get back up. Whilst this might make some logical sense that they would be able to do that, it does kind of ruin the entire mechanic if they can. So I do trust my players not to try and suggest these type of things. Additionally, a death saving throw is still taken in case a nat 1 or a nat 20 is rolled. From using these rules for a little while, I find the Boromir rules really help add a level of tactical depth to combat and to going down. Most commonly, my players will use this ability to crawl out of AoE effects, so they're not taking those automatic death saving throws every turn. Although a couple of times it has been used for some more creative effects and has been used to deal some lasting damage. Additionally, because players aren't unconscious, it does have that ability to make either awesome last stands, where your players might want to cast a bigger spell rather than just a cantrip if they're on their last death saving throw. It also means if they fail all 3 death saving throws and do go down, they still might have a chance to have some lasting last words, which really adds to the entire drama of this, adds to the tension, and creates some great roleplay potential. The second homebrew rule I introduced to my D&D 5e games is something I call lingering death saving throws, which, trust me, are as fun as they sound. What this rule does is means that failed death saving throws last until your next long rest. Meaning, if you go down and fail 2 death saving throws, even if you're healed and get back up, if you go down again before your next long rest, you still have those 2 failed death saving throws. What I found is that this rule makes players treat going down with a lot more seriousness than they would otherwise. It also stops players from yo-yoing. That is, going down, healing a couple of hit points, getting back up and jumping straight back into the fight. Instead, they've got to spend maybe that extra turn making sure they're healed enough so that when they do go back into the fight, they're not just going to go back down, fail another death saving throw, and potentially just full on die. This rule works really well with our last homebrew rule that I tend to use a lot, the aptly named Death Dice. If you take one thing away from this video, please introduce this rule to your home games. It is so much fun. The only thing this rule changes is who rolls a death saving throw. See, my players don't roll death saving throws. I, the DM, roll death saving throws, and I don't tell them what they get. This means when a player goes down, at the end of their turn, they don't know if I rolled a nat 1 or a 14. Genuinely, it's so much fun. Because players have to treat going down with so much more seriousness. They can't just pass it off as, oh, we'll just get them up next turn. There might not be a next turn for this player. This adds loads of tension to every single moment a player is down. It also adds a lot to tactical gameplay, because it adds that element of the unknown, meaning players have to plan for a lot of different scenarios and take that just-in-case scenario a lot more seriously. Genuinely, it's a load of fun, especially mixed with previous rules as well. If a player is on the ground for 2 turns, rolls 2 death saving throws and then gets back up, that player won't know how many death saving throws they are currently on. They don't know how many they've passed, they don't know how many they've failed. And that lasts until their next long death if you're also using the lingering death saves rule. If you do choose to use this rule, I would highly advise getting a really cool dice, especially if you play in person, to use for these scenarios. To use a specific death dice really just adds to the entire theming of this. And if you are looking at getting an absolute badass dice, I would highly recommend looking at only crits. I personally use these Seaweed Tangle dice. One, they're dark and grim and perfectly suit the theme of a death dice, but they're also stone, meaning that they have the literal weight of death about them. They're really cool thematically and really fit the table. You can find them using the link below, and if you do buy anything through Only Crits, it is an affiliate link. It will help support me and this channel, and we do greatly appreciate it. And make sure to use the code HalflingsRock at checkout to get a further 10% off your order. Some of you might be thinking that this combination of rules might be a bit harsh on players, but I've not found this to be true. If anything, I find players are actually more cautious when using these rules, because I've been using these rules for probably about 5-6 years now. Oh geez, I've been playing this campaign a long time. But I've never actually had a player die on me yet. And I think it's because people take the threat of death so much more serious when you have these types of rules in place. Although I still would advise a little bit of caution, especially if you're playing these rules for the first time. So, yeah, those are the 3 homebrew rules that I personally use to make death saving throws in 5e actually kind of good and actually kind of exciting. If you do decide to use any of these rules in your home game, please let me know how it goes, because frankly, they're loads of fun, add loads of tactical depth, and I really want to hear those stories. And if there are any homebrew rules that you like to use for your death mechanics, please post them below. I always like adding more to mess with my players. But yeah, I still don't know how to end these videos. Bye.